Story 1. That person from PricewaterhouseCoopers at the Oscars a few years ago mixed up the envelopes and caused a mistake in the Best Picture announcement. The entire cast of La La Land came on stage to celebrate, only to turn around and inform the cast of Moonlight that they actually won. Story 2. I work for the United States Postal Service, and we deliver United Parcel Service packages as a last-mile service. There is a person at United Parcel Service who puts one sticker on the box before it comes to us. It is a little rectangular sticker. They manage to cover all of the important information on the label 50% of the time. You have a whole box. Stop putting it on the label. Story 3. Nick Leeson was a trader who lost $1 billion through unauthorized trades, which ultimately led to the bankruptcy of Barings Bank in 1995. Story 4. Has anyone mentioned the individual who disrupted the Suez Canal and caused a significant economic chain of events? Story 5. The chief executive officer of Sears believed that the internet was a passing trend. As the definitive name in mail order, Sears had the warehouses and logistics in place to become a competitor to Amazon years before Jeff Bezos established it. This was one of the few mistakes that cost the company at least $1 trillion. Story 6. All of the assassins of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, including the one who managed to carry out the task. Story 7. I removed a door to install a cat flap. After cutting the hole and fitting the cat flap, I rehung the door. The cat flap was positioned at the top of the door. Story 8. I had the easiest part-time job ever. But this isn't about me. It's about the girl who worked there full-time that I relieved twice a week. The entire job was to sit there, monitor a door, and watch movies on my tablet or phone. The main purpose of having security on-site was that the company received a significant discount on their fire insurance if they had 24-hour security. Essentially, the job was to stay awake. This girl frequently brought in a pillow and blanket, and about 90% of the time when I arrived to relieve her, she was fast asleep. It wasn't like she worked a night shift. She worked a second shift but was still out cold. The other 10% of the time, she was just waking up as I walked through the door. Personally, I didn't care. My philosophy is to do my job, get paid, and go home. I'm not concerned about what my coworkers are doing unless it reflects poorly on me. The only thing I did to protect myself in this situation was mention it to my supervisor, who took no action. This way, if it was ever addressed, I could honestly say I had raised the issue. Once I informed my supervisor, if they chose not to act, it wasn't my problem. I had done my part, and the responsibility was on them. It took the company 6 months to realize she was just showing up and sleeping during her shift. The client literally had to trip over her to catch on. She was fired immediately. Story 9. Liz Truss took office and went to extreme lengths to care for her wealthy friends at the top. She brought the currency to historic lows with Kwasi Kwarteng's poorly planned mini-budget, harmed the housing market, announced £45 billion in unplanned tax cuts, then went into hiding and left the job after 7 weeks. She is the shortest-serving Prime Minister in UK history, with the previous shortest-serving Prime Minister having died in office after serving just shy of 4 months. Story 10. A recent example is Ippei Mizuhara, a translator for Shohei Ohtani, the athlete with the biggest contract in sports history. Mizuhara was being paid between $300,000 and $500,000 a year to spend time with his friend, watch professional baseball games from the dugout, and travel across the country. He missed an opportunity with that arrangement. Story 11. LastPass had their customer database compromised, which threatened their entire business model of protecting customer secrets. As a result, I switched to Bitwarden and changed all my passwords. Story 12. All the officers at Uvalde. All they had to do was go in and neutralize the shooter. Instead, they ran and hid, leading to more children being harmed. Story 13. Lynette Frum, who failed in her assassination attempt on Gerald Ford from 2 feet away because she did not realize she had to chamber a round before her gun would fire. Story 14. Gerald Ratner, a jewelry shop owner, said the product his company made was of poor quality and it cost his company £500 million in one night. Story 15. The surgeon who had a 300% mortality rate during an amputation apparently performed it in 2.5 minutes. The patient died, someone in attendance died of shock, and an assistant died because his fingers were also amputated and he developed an infection. Story 16, Blockbuster. They passed on the opportunity to acquire a small DVD mail-order rental business called Netflix and refused to acknowledge the growth of internet streaming and film viewing. They went from 9,000 stores at their peak in 2004 to just one store now, which carries the name only and operates mainly as a novelty shop with souvenirs. Story 17, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter. All he had to do was translate words, follow around the best baseball player in the world, and he even got to be best friends with him. All he had to do was not steal $16 million from his boss. Story 18. The fake sign language interpreter from Tampa was signing nonsensical words, and people will realize that. Story 19. The Xbox One representative was assigned to unveil the new console, but ended up advising people to stick with the Xbox 360 if they did not want to be always online. They chose to stay with the Xbox 360. Story 20. Refuse bag makers, your only job is to create a bag thick enough to hold rubbish without splitting. Is it really that hard? Story 21. Not a person, but eyelashes. Your eyelashes are intended to keep debris out of your eyes. Every time I have had something in my eye, it was an eyelash. Story 22. Airman David P. Powell dropped a socket while working on a shuttle in Arkansas, which pierced the side of it, and the explosion launched a nuclear warhead 100 feet. Story 23. Jacob Ruzelbin went to a fake maritime school, did not speak Italian or English, and did not understand helm commands. Whoever hired him is ultimately to blame, alongside the captain, who should have realized they hired someone who was grossly unqualified. In fact, Sea-speak is the most common way to communicate on bridges, which consists of English and the numbers 0 to 9 for helm commands. If I said, set course 090 degrees, you would know your course is 090 or east. I am confident that most of you could qualify in a day. By the way, Jacob Ruzelbin ran away in a cowardly manner. Story 24. People who install public restroom stalls but leave gaps in the doors so you can make eye contact with others waiting for a stall are perplexing. Additionally, why are purse hooks not being installed in the stalls? Most public bathrooms I use do not have a place to hang my bag, and it is evident that there was never one installed. Story 25. I'll go with Liu Bang, who is remembered by Chinese historians as one of the best emperors to grace the country. That wasn't his original job, and it's easy to make a case that he made a significant mistake in his first occupation. Liu was basically a nobody, a peasant born to nothing, who, through a lack of hard work and a whole lot of charisma, became appointed to the entry-level bureaucratic position of local sheriff in his area. One day, Liu was escorting a group of prisoners to a labor camp when his first mistake occurred. Some of the prisoners escaped. For most modern sheriffs, that's a bad look, but not the end of the world. In Qin China, though, allowing prisoners to escape came with a death sentence. So Liu figured, in for a penny, in for a pound, and decided to further complicate the situation by releasing all the other prisoners. He compounded this by leading some of them as an outlaw group. While this was occurring, the rest of China was undergoing a huge upheaval. The 800-year-old Zhou dynasty had just been replaced by the Qin dynasty, which had been the first to control much of what we now consider to be China. Through a series of continued in-for-a-penny type events, and by being one of the worst low-ranking bureaucrats possible, Liu gradually became a very powerful man, eventually toppling the Qin dynasty and creating the Han dynasty, which would go on to rule China for about 400 years with a few interruptions. By all accounts, Liu was much better at being emperor than at being a sheriff. To summarize, a guy makes a mistake at work. To cover it up, he takes steps that eventually result in the entire government he works for collapsing and being replaced by one with him at the head. Talk about failing upwards. Story 26. The Secret Service allowed JFK to ride in an open car. Protecting him means you have to say no to what he wants. Story 27. The CEO of Max seems to be doing a good job of undermining a very successful and established brand. Story 28. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer on the set of Rust, had one job: to check the gun for live ammunition. She did not do that, which resulted in the death of Ms. Hutchins. One job. Story 29. Liz Truss became Prime Minister of a G7 nation. further destabilizing a fragile economy by dramatically raising interest rates, and was ultimately humiliated before resigning. Nowadays, she appears on television unexpectedly, resembling a blonde doll, only to make a fool of herself. Story 30. The person who sent out the ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. This is not a drill alert. During a drill seems to have made a significant mistake with their one job. Story 31. Arnold Rimmer failed to seal the drive plate, resulting in a radiation leak that killed the entire crew of the mining ship Red Dwarf. Story 32. There is only one real winner, a young George Washington. In 1754, he was ordered to take some men to the forks of the Ohio, which is present-day Pittsburgh, to intimidate the French garrison into leaving. Instead, it turned into an ambush and massacre of a small detachment of French soldiers and a diplomatic envoy. This naturally upset the French. The response was the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. The effects of this one action have altered the course of human history in a way that few others could even come close to. To help cover the costs of the 7 Years' War, the British Parliament imposed taxes on the American colonies. This led to the American Revolution, American independence, and everything that followed in the United States, including representative democracy. That revolution sparked the French Revolution and the Spanish-American Wars of Independence. The French Revolution brought about Napoleon, which led to the rise of British dominance and their vast colonial empire. The British Empire upset many and ultimately made the Germans envious, prompting them to attempt their own world empires, twice. The German failures at establishing a global empire contributed to the decline of the British Empire and the rise of the American and Soviet superpowers. Their rivalry resulted in the space race and rapid technological advancements to the point that I am currently sitting in my home office typing this on a smartphone, explaining what happened when a young George Washington made one small mistake, allowing you to read this from any place on Earth instantly. Story 33. The welder who caused the explosion in Beirut in 2020 killed over 200 people during the peak of COVID-19 and essentially led to the collapse of the entire country. One welder took down an entire country. Story 34. The Robinhood trading app was created to level the playing field between large equity trading firms and everyday traders. When smaller investors began making money and the larger trading houses started losing money on their short positions, they halted trading for regular users, allowing the larger firms to realign their positions and avoid significant losses. Story 35. Gerald Ratner. Story 36. The Wonka experience in Glasgow and the TanaCon convention. I heard that Firefest was a disaster. Story 37. There has been a news reporter who was fired from her job in Quebec after she referred to Kim Jong-un, reading it as Roman numerals. Story 38. Elon Musk is an investor and CEO whose main purpose is to instill confidence in his corporate entities. He had Tesla and SpaceX going for him, and he was nearly universally admired as a future-oriented genius who, albeit a bit eccentric, was funneling his fortune into the betterment of humanity. He was on track to being one of the most important and consequential people of the 21st century, without complications attached to that. All he had to do was invest his money in these ventures and live whatever life he wanted in private. Then he decided to devote seemingly all of his energy to being incredibly outspoken about his views on immigrants, transgender people, and basically anyone politically left of center. Meanwhile, he amplified the voices of bigots and extremists. In doing so, he undermined the genius narrative and now appears to be an individual who has become so wealthy that he is insulated from failure. Story 39. JFK's limo driver. What's that? Some loud bangs. The president is clutching himself, and someone has just shouted, "My God! They're going to kill us all!" Even though there's a freeway right in front of me, I better slow this limo down while I get to the bottom of this mystery. Story 40. I was tasked with opening the delivery gate so we could accept deliveries each day and check their accuracy. One day, upon arrival at work, I learned that someone had changed the lock on the gate and did not leave a key. In a panic, I decided to try to break the lock using various tools, but nothing worked. I then used a forklift to snap the lock, which worked, but I also managed to remove a 500-kilogram gate from its hinges. I tried to fix my error, but it didn't work. Following this incident, there was an investigation that resulted in me losing my job after working there for 15 years. Story 41. Hillary Clinton needed to campaign in the Rust Belt instead of trying to avoid the spotlight all summer. Story 42. The writers of Star Wars Episode 7 had one job: to reunite the original trio, Han, Luke, and Leia. They failed. Making a Star Wars sequel without reuniting the trio is like making a Harry Potter sequel without reuniting Harry, Ron, and Hermione. It's a disappointment. Story 43. It's the reason I was stabbed 8 times. While working in a segregation unit, I was trying to prepare an empty cell for use in our staff assault unit. I called on the radio to control, stating C18, and repeated it slowly. This person's job is to listen for radio communications regarding doors and to open the correct one. However, the cell I was standing in front of wasn't opening. It was actually the cell 2 away from me. I reached for my spray, but the inmate was already there with a shank. He got me quickly, but I was still able to hold him back for a short while. We struggled on the ground, and a team was sent to support me. They managed to get him off me, and I was taken to the emergency room. The control center operator thought I said C16, and he was subsequently fired. Story 44. The Securities and Exchange Commission and almost all regulatory bodies related to the United States stock market are corrupt. Story 45. Among many examples in professional sports, I always think of Josh Gordon. He was immensely talented but struggled with his addiction to marijuana. Story 46. That first judge who ordered that a corporation must prioritize shareholders' profit over the employees. Story 47. Hitler was never going to win the war, but he could have chosen not to invade Russia. It would have been easy to avoid that conflict. Stalin was agreeable with Hitler, yet Hitler, in a misguided sense of priority, felt the need to secure Lebensraum. This situation can also be applied to the Emperor of Japan regarding the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japan could have easily left Pearl Harbor alone. The United States might have eventually gotten involved due to territorial annexations, but at that time, the US was quite racially prejudiced and may have let it go for a while. Instead, Japan provoked the United States, resulting in nuclear bombings that highlighted the magnitude of that mistake. Story 48. Culpability for the false alert was attributed to an employee at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, who officials said was a 10-year agency veteran that had previously exhibited troubling behavior, according to the Washington Post. Story 49. The bridge crew of the Queen of the North, a 700-passenger ferry in the Canadian ferry system, got off course and collided with a submerged rock while cruising at normal speed. It was not the worst maritime disaster ever. 99 out of 101 people were able to evacuate before it sank. It is memorable to me because I had been a passenger about 5 years before the wreck. Story 50. I had a dream job and I messed it up. I have no one to blame but myself. There have been a lot of tears. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.